It's so nice to meet you.
Thanks, Stephen.
I wasn't part of the SCG team when you went through your process. You are the founder and former CEO of TeamSupport. Looking back, what initially inspired you to start TeamSupport?
Started TeamSupport because of a problem we had in my last company. We had a real issue with customer support, and particularly customer support technology and keeping track of all the issues going on. And we'd written a little piece of software inside that last company to basically solve this problem. And sold that last company, had some time on my hands, and I decided to start TeamSupport. And we did customer support software primarily for a B2B software company. So like any good problem, it was solved by having that issue at a prior company.
So growing and starting a business is not easy.
No.
You started out as a 3-person team. You grew it into a dominant player in a multi-billion-dollar industry. How did you do that?
I have no idea. It's a lot of hard work, you're right. I was very lucky. I had 2 co-founders that I'd worked with in my prior company. I knew them very well and we trusted each other. And you're right, it's a very, very hard slog. And for the first couple of years, we didn't have a lot of traction. We had a sort of product that we kind of got out there, and we knew we had a good market, and that's really what kept us going. But it took, like anything else, longer and more money than we anticipated, but we finally started getting some traction. And that moment in a software company when you start getting that traction is kind of a magical moment. And then we took off after that.
Many entrepreneurs start their company to solve a problem, like you did. They're not thinking about the exit. At what point did you start thinking about that exit?
As soon as we took venture capital, I knew we were on a clock and we had to sell the company. And I think that was probably early on a goal of the company was to be able to build it and eventually sell it. But really the early goal was just to build a great company and a great product. And we did that. And a secondary benefit of that was the ability to attract capital and then eventually sell the company as well.
As a CEO, you understand how impactful mentorship can be on people's personal and professional lives. I know you started working early on with our team. What made you start having those discussions?
SCG has always done a really good job of putting content out there. And I went on SCG's mailing list early on and actually learned a lot about the valuation of SaaS companies through their content. I had been through selling a company before and actually failed selling a company when I didn't have a banker. We went through a whole process. I thought I could do it myself, and the deal collapsed rather epically. Luckily, 2 years later, we ended up reselling the company with a banker at that time. So I was, from very early on, convinced that when we got to the point the company was ready to sell, I would hire a banker.
What kind of advice did Software Equity Group give you back then?
They really were good at giving us advice and mentorship about getting the company ready to sell. And there's a lot of work that has to go into a company before you take it to market. Getting your balance sheet right, obviously getting the product right, getting your team put together for the eventual sale, and really setting the company up for success. And their advice and mentorship during that whole process was absolutely invaluable.
Was there any specific piece of advice that you found the most valuable?
Don't lose focus. And especially as we got later in the process, it's very easy to lose focus on running the company and all the things we have to do day to day. When you're in a sale process, you end up having 2 jobs as a CEO. You've got to run the company and make sure it doesn't fall apart, and you have your eye on that with all the myriad of things we have to do there, but then also run the process. And being able to juggle both of those at the same time is not always easy. And the team at SCG really did a great job helping me with that and making sure that we did continue to run the company and didn't lose focus of that. The entire team really becomes your mentor, your advisor, your psychologist in many ways. So the relationship with that team really has to be not just at a business level, but at a personal level. And I became friends with the team at SCG. I still am friends with the entire team at SCG. And that relationship is really important when selecting a bank. And I felt I had that with the team at Software Equity Group. I love the fact that SCG didn't want to jump on board with us early on and take fees and try to sell a company that they ultimately didn't think was saleable. When we got to the point that we were saleable, again, we engaged SCG and the process went very smoothly. But I think the biggest piece of advice is just don't try to sell a company before it's ready. And they really guided me along that path, and we ensured that we got to that point before we started the process of selling the company.
So your third exit, what was this process like?
It was actually very smooth, but I'll caveat that by saying it's still a very, very hard process. I had been through trying to sell my first software company twice. First time I did it without a banker, or I attempted to do it without a banker, and we went right to the very last minute, and the acquiring company said, no, we're not going to sign, and the whole deal collapsed. Comparatively, selling TeamSupport was a very, very smooth transaction. From beginning of engagement with SEG all the way to the eventual signing of the documents. The process went surprisingly smoothly, and I give a huge amount of credit to the team at SEG. They obviously knew what they were doing. They'd been through the processes before. They guided me very well in how to make that transaction work. And just overall, we worked very well as a team to get the deal to the finish line.
So we have a methodology for determining a company's valuation. We look at both the qualitative and the quantitative factors, hundreds of deal comps. We look at buyers' insights, all to come up with a number to guide you. And in your case, we guided you to a number, but you were able to get significantly more. How did that make you feel?
Obviously great. It was interesting. We talked to several bankers, and we had a range of guidance. And one banker particularly gave us a guidance that was significantly higher than anybody else. And in hindsight, they were trying to get our business. They were trying to convince me that they could get a higher valuation, in trying to convince me that it was right time to sell the company. SEG did not do that. They came up with a guidance that I thought was appropriate based on my research I'd done in the marketplace as well. And we elected to go to market with that really as a guidance for us. I like the philosophy of guiding where you think the market is, and maybe even a little bit lower, and eventually getting a higher outcome than that. That's much better than guiding higher than getting a lower outcome. And I appreciated that SEG put together what we thought was a very realistic number that turned into being a very realistic number that we actually exceeded. So another great reason to have the team at SEG do our deal.
For software leaders who are in the space that you were a couple of years ago, growing but not sure about an exit, what would you tell them?
I really would say two things. Number one, be sure you're ready to exit. And that's both make sure the company is in the right position to exit. You've got the product, the growth, the team that's ready to support you during an exit, but make sure you're mentally in a place to let your baby go. It's especially as a founder, you've started this from scratch. You've built it, you've nurtured it, you've grown it. And one of two things is going to happen. Either, okay, I'm tired, it's ready to sell, it's time to go and do something else, or no, I don't want to let it go. And if you're in that latter camp, it's not time to sell. You have to be mentally ready to be able to sell the company, do a transaction, and frankly, move on. The second piece of advice that I've given to many, many founders is hire an investment bank. I went through my first attempted transaction, selling a different software company without an advisor, without a bank, and that deal failed epically. And my next two transactions with that company and then with TeamSupport, I hired investment bankers for those deals, and they both went very smoothly. It's always important to hire a professional and a professional team that knows what they're doing. I've sold 3 software companies. SEG has sold dozens, if not hundreds, of software companies. They are the experts in that field. And being able to hire the experts and the people with a team of knowledgeable, experienced people to do that transaction is immensely helpful. And that's advice I give to any founder that's looking to do a transaction.
This has been great. Thank you so much for your time today.
You're making it easy. Thanks, Stephanie.